Hi, welcome. Today's lecture will be on hospital oral surgery. We are fast approaching the end of the lecture schedule for final year. I guess there is just one more topic to be covered, and with that, we'll be wrapping it up. So, today's lecture that is the hospital oral surgery. So, most of the oral surgical procedures can be done in the dental clinic on outpatient basis. The patient can just walk into the clinic, get the procedure done, and he can go back. The procedure will be done under local anesthesia. But there are certain procedures or certain cases where a procedure cannot be done in the OP. You need to do the procedure in the operation theater under general anesthesia, and of course, which requires a hospital setup. So that's called as hospital oral surgery. So now in this lecture, we are just going to give you a brief outline about how to get a case or what are the kind of patients where what are the kind of cases where the procedure needs to be done in the general anesthesia, and second, how to admit a patient, the paperwork, and the anesthetic criteria, how to get approval from the anesthetist, and then what are the who are the OT personnel, who are all the personnel or people who are in the OT, what are their duties, and how to write the discharge summary, and certain basic procedures that are being followed in the operation theater. So, according to the learning outcomes, you should be able to carry out the necessary steps for admission of patients in the hospital, and you should be able to list out the investigations, the basic investigations required for general anesthesia, and if there is any referral you need. So, how to seek referral from other specialists in specific situations. Okay, the hospital has a responsibility to provide comprehensive oral care for the patient, and hospital oral care can vary from ward consultation to emergency care and elective oral surgery. Sometimes a physician will ask for a dental consultation, so you might have to go to the ward, check the patient, and give your opinion. Or certain cases like an emergency case where a patient has sustained a trauma, either a maxillofacial trauma or trauma to his teeth, and you are called to attend to the case. And there are certain elective cases, certain elective procedures which needs to be done under general anesthesia. Many oral surgery procedure can be done under LA in the clinic, but there are certain procedures which needs to be done in the hospital. So what are the various surgical procedures that are performed in the hospital setup? When you come across a medically compromised patients, you expect a medical emergency to happen, and you feel that it is better you are in a proper setup with proper backup so that you will be able to manage the medical emergency properly. So, for example, you have a case with a bleeding disorder and you anticipate profuse bleeding. So, you feel that if it is done under the OT, it will be easier for you to control the bleeding. Or there is a case where you expect some kind of medical emergency like a anginal attack or an infarction, or can be anything. So, medically compromised patients, you might go in for an emergency. You can post the patient in the hospital and do the procedure under GA, and certain major procedures like maxillofacial trauma, orthognathic surgery, etc., cannot be done under local anesthesia in the OP setup. And uncooperative patients, especially pediatric patients, so where you feel that it's better, you can do the procedure much more peacefully if the patient is under GA. So uncooperative patients, and multiple extractions where you feel it requires a lot of time. For example, there is multiple impacted teeth, or both all four third molars are impacted. If you are going to do all four in one shot, it's better you do it under GA in the OT, because it is highly impossible to do the procedure under LA, because it is going to be very traumatic to the patient. So just to save the time and for the comfort of the patient, you can post the patient under GA. When you feel that strict asepsis is required, a immunocompromised patient, or you feel the asepsis in your dental setup is not adequate enough, when you feel that strict asepsis is required, yes, OT is the answer. And when you anticipate post-surgical complication like hemorrhage, as I said earlier, medically compromised patients, post it under GA in the OT. And if the patient is hospitalized for some other reason and he requires the oral surgery, yes, you can go ahead and do the procedure in the hospital itself under GA. So what are the general guidelines for hospital oral surgery? First and foremost, you need to admit the patient into the hospital, and then you should be aware of the operating room procedures. So coming to the admission. So admission is like, first you write a form, fill up a form, just saying that you are going to admit this patient for such and such procedure. The patient is admitted now. Normally, you need to admit the patient at least 24 hours before the surgery. Means for any healthy patient, because the patient has to be assessed by the anesthetist, and if there is some medical problem, the anesthetist might require a opinion from a specialist. For example, the patient has a history of myocardial infarction, or he's got a history of bronchial asthma. Better to get get the patient evaluated and assessed by a cardiologist or a physician, and then get a clean check, get an approval from them, and then send the patient to the anesthetist for assessment. So the anesthetist will do this assessment. He requires certain basic investigations to assess the systemic health of the patient and fitness of the patient for the surgery. And I am sure you must be aware of the ASA classifications, ASA 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So now, what are the routine investigations that that normally an anesthetist will ask for? To start with, the blood profile. That is, they will ask for hemoglobin, packed cell volume, RBC count, and it comes to WBC, both total count and differential count, platelet count, and to check the coagulation of the patient. Most of the time they will ask for bleeding time and clotting time, but these days they ask for INR, International Normalized Ratio, and they will also ask for erythrocyte sedimentation ratio, that is a ESR. There, in cases of infection, ESR will be elevated. And then you will also ask for serum electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride, etc. And then if they will ask for a random blood sugar, and if the patient is a diabetic, you might ask for HbA1c, glycosylated hemoglobin, and then urea creatinine, and HIV, HBsAg, that is hepatitis B surface antigen, and chest X-ray. So these are the baseline investigations normally asked, or normally is required by a anesthetist for assessment of a patient who is going for a procedure under GA. So at the admission, the following data has to be provided: the name, age, sex, and the permanent address of the patient, a brief personal family history and detail of clinical examination, the reason for admission and provisional diagnosis, the anticipated duration of stay in the hospital, and details of previous hospitalization if it is relevant, and if there is any further investigations to be ordered, it has to be mentioned. So on admission, the patient will be seen by an anesthetist, because they have to assess the fitness of the patient for general anesthesia. So the patient will be, most of the time they give a mild sedation to relieve anxiety, and oral feed will be withheld for at least 6 hours prior to GA. You call it as nothing per oral, NPO, for 6 hours. So quick 6 hours prior to administration of GA, the patient shouldn't eat or drink anything, not even a glass of water. This is just to avoid post-operative vomiting. And oral prophylaxis is preferred for oral surgical procedures before the surgery, because just to make sure to minimize the bacterial count in the oral cavity, keep that area as aseptic as possible. And face preparation, basically it means shaving of the mustache or beard for males, because a thick hair growth can harbor bacteria, leading to contamination. And details of pre-medications are left to the description of the anesthetist. The anesthetist will be giving a sedative, sometimes he might give an antiemetic, a muscle relaxant, etc. So many things. So the pre-medication part normally is given to the anesthetist will take care. And if the patient is medically compromised, like an hypertensive or a diabetic, they have to get their medications according to the advice of the physician. And indications regarding requirements of transfusion should be considered, because if you anticipate a heavy blood loss during the surgery, better to keep blood or packed cell in store. You will have to do a blood grouping of the patient, and get the blood, keep it ready, whole blood, keep it ready, so that if blood is required, it can be transfused immediately. And if you require any specialist consultation, has to be done before the procedure. And last but not the least, a consent form has to be signed by the patient. What are the additional information that must be provided? The anesthetist should be explained about the procedure, what you're going to do, whether you're going to do a open reduction or internal fixation, whether it's going to be an orthognathic surgery or an onco surgery. The anesthetist should be having an idea about the procedure. So you have to give a brief outline of the surgical procedure, and you should also say, tell him about the duration of the surgery. So he will be able to calculate the dose of anesthesia that is required, and whether you are going to anticipate any blood loss, so that fluids or and blood will be kept ready, because the fluid balance of the patient is very important, and it can have adverse effects if it gets jeopardized. And the positioning of the patient, because we are going to do a oral surgical procedure, so there should be, the intubation should be through the nose, so the oral cavity is left open. And similarly, if we are going to perform a procedure involving the nose also, there are a lot of other options like submental intubation, etc., through which the intubation is done and anesthesia is administered, and the surgical site is left clear for the surgeon. And positioning of the patient, as I said earlier, that depends, like whether you are going to need to have the neck flexed, etc. And necessity for intermaxillary fixation, this is for trauma cases. If you are going to do an intermaxillary fixation and the patient is going to remain under intermaxillary fixation post-operatively, the anesthetist should be told about it, because accordingly he will plan the intubation as well as the post-operative care. Because in case the patient is vomiting post-operatively, and if there is an intermaxillary fixation, it has to be removed, otherwise the patient is going to aspirate on his vomitus. And provision of nasogastric tube post-operatively, especially in oncosurgeries where neck dissection also has been done. So a Ryle's tube or a nasogastric tube will be installed, introduced to provide nutrition for the patient. And when you are going to do a procedure, we normally inject local anesthetic solution, lignocaine without adrenaline, or saline, just normal saline, into the tissues before making the incision. This is kind of to help us to um, differentiate the tissue planes. Well, that is the purpose of injecting. But the thing is, when we are injecting this solution, you will have to tell the anesthetist prior that you are going to inject, because when you are injecting, there is going to be a fluctuation in the blood pressure and the heart rate of the patient. So it's better the anesthetist is aware of certain things, all these things, before you do it. Coming to the operating room, if you check any of these OTs, operation theaters, it will be isolated. It will be a separate building, quite away from the main hospital setup. This is just for the purpose of keeping it sterile and aseptic, so that it is not a place where the general public is roaming around. So it should be properly isolated. And apart from the operating rooms, they'll be having at least 2 or 3 operating rooms, and apart from that, you will have a room where the surgeons and anesthetists and the nurses will change from their street clothes into the OT garbs. And you will have a room where the instruments are being sterilized, which contains an autoclave. And there will be a room where they will be storing all the sterile instrument. And there will be one more room called as the linen room, where they will be storing all the OT dress and the sterile OT gowns. And centralization of equipments and instruments and bacterial isolation, these are all important criteria for our operating room or an operation theater for maintenance of asepsis. They have to prepare the operation site. So how do they do it? Intraorally, you have a sponge holder and a bowl of antiseptic solution. The entire oral cavity will be fully scrubbed, using a gauze which is soaked with the antiseptic solution. The patient has already been intubated, anesthesia is administered. Okay, the patient is now under GA. So intraoral scrubbing is done. Then after that, extraoral preparation, that is the skin. Again, it is painted with an antiseptic solution. Once the area is made aseptic, now the draping part comes in. So sterile drapes are used, at least some 4 to 5 drapes are used, and the patient is draped properly in such a way that only the surgical site is exposed. So you can see the patient is literally being wrapped up like a just wrapped up with the drape, and only that area which where the surgery is going to be performed is exposed. Right, that is a cleft clip surgery. Okay, and that is a post-operative picture after the suturing has been done. Okay. All right. Once the procedure is over, we wait for the patient to recover. So once the anesthesia effect wears off, the patient will show signs of recovery. And once the patient is completely out of GA, the patient will be shifted out. And that patient will be shifted to the post-operative ward. And in the post-operative ward, the patient has been under general anesthesia for say an hour or so, or more than an hour. So now his system has to come back to its normal functioning mode. He has started breathing, his heart has started beating, but still we have to wait till he is able to eat or drink. So we'll have to wait for a while, and during that phase, nutrition and fluid rehabilitation will be provided by intravenous fluids. So normally we use DNS, dextrose normal saline or Ringer's lactate as IV fluids. At least 1 or 2 pints will be administered, and patient is now in the post-operative ward, and the patient's vitals have to be monitored periodically. Make sure that it is stable, and now the patient is totally under the anesthetist's care. Okay, so in case there is any emergency or any mishap during this period, it's the anesthetist's responsibility and he has to manage it. And so as when once the vitals are stable and the patient is able to take sips of water, and he has no nausea, and he is feeling good, and he has passed urine. Okay, that is another important thing. Make sure that his kidney is functioning normally and his sphincters are back to its function. So once he has passed urine, and then we will shift the patient to the ward. Okay, so the patients, so two things: systemic care and local care. Systemic care is make sure the vitals are stable and the bodily functions are back to normal. Local care is the particular area where you have done the surgery. Make sure that area is clean and sterile, and healing is established. So once the thing is fine, for example, now thing is like if the patient has been intubated with the Ryle's tube, you have to monitor input and output. So input says to tell you how much fluid or how much nutrition in the form of fluid is being administered in liters, and you will also have to catheterize the patient, or you can measure the amount of urine he is passing. So that will tell you whether how much fluid is being instilled and how much the output is, that is the urinary output is. So that will tell you the renal functioning. And in case and if you have catheterized the patient, again you have to measure the amount of urine that is being excreted by the patient, and that is maintained in a chart. And so once the patient is healed completely, or healing is like in progress, maybe after a week or so you are discharging the patient, but still you need the patient to come for a review. So this is also the responsibility of the surgeon. So what are the things that what are the information that you need to provide in the discharge summary sheet? First is the name with the reference number, the basic information about the patient, age, gender, etc., and the date of admission, the date of the surgery, and the date of the discharge. That has to be mentioned. And a brief case history about the condition for which the surgery was performed. That is the diagnosis you have to write, followed by the surgical procedure, a brief outline of the surgical procedure that was done. It should be brief: the incision which was placed, how the treatment was, how the procedure was done, and how many sutures you placed, what material you used for suturing, and then of course the medications, starting from the IV fluids, the antibiotics, if they have given any nutrition supplements, everything has to be mentioned in the medications part, everything. And then you write about the post discharge instructions. Post operatively, what are the instructions that you need to give to the patient, and what the patient is supposed to follow. and if there is any physiotherapy required, it has to be mentioned. And of course you have to mention the date of the review, when the patient is coming back for review. So that brings us to the end. So the saying is, surgery is not complete until patient stops complaining post-operatively. Okay, so it is the surgeon's responsibility to make sure that the healing is complete. So it's not over, the surgery is not over if the patient keeps coming back to you repeatedly with one complaint or another, which means that the procedure which you have done is still not complete. Unless and until the patient is completely healed and the patient is not coming back to you with any complaint, your surgery is not over. Thank you. So that brings us to the end, and if you have any doubts, questions, queries, please post it on the e-portal. I'll be very more than happy to answer you. Thank you very much.